Hello and welcome back. I know we've been talking a lot about functions lately. I think we should give that a break for a little bit. For the most part, we're done with functions. At least for a little bit. So let's talk about scope. Scope is a subject that I've been purposely dancing around. Scope is basically where are variables allowed to live. So we've been creating a variable just sort of in our script here. Variable name, actually it's a variable course, is equal to JavaScript for beginners. And we can use this variable anywhere in our script. So if we created a function do a thing, we could say console.log course. We could even return course because we've defined this variable up here and we're going to use it inside of this function. So let's go ahead and refresh our page and just type course as a variable. We're going to see JavaScript for beginners, sure enough. And then do a thing is a function. We can see it's presented by this curly F. We put parentheses around it, or after it rather, hit enter, and we're going to see JavaScript for beginners is console logged, and it returns JavaScript for beginners. This is an introduction into scoping. So the idea is that if you have a variable that's outside of a function, you can use that variable inside of a function. And so really this is your outer scope. You can think of this as like the atmosphere around our planet. No matter where you are pretty much accessible to something that is found in the atmosphere, oxygen or nitrogen or hydrogen, something like that. And the planet itself would be the function. And so because this variable here sort of wraps around all the other functions that are, think of it like on the same line here, sort of wraps around that, you can use it inside of a function. Now the opposite is absolutely not true. This is very important to note. So if we created a variable in here, var teacher is equal to Caleb Tallinn, and it doesn't matter what we return or what we console log. In fact, we can even get rid of both of those. And we did console.log teacher. This is not going to work because this variable is scoped to this function. So let's go ahead and give this a refresh, and you can see that uncaught reference error teacher is not defined. And that's because even though it is defined in here, and we can console log it in here, watch this. Console log, let's go ahead and let's make exclamation marks for the first one. And for the second one is out of scope. And then let's run do a thing. So we actually have to run this function. In fact, we could turn this into an IIFE. If we wanted to, we could do something like that. Let's go ahead, refresh. And it says, hey, teacher is in here. It's in the function, but it is not accessible outside of the function. And so the opposite of what I was saying originally is not true. But watch this. We can still use course inside of the function, even if it's an immediately invoked function expression. There it is. There's my name. There's the course name. Local variable, global variable. And those are the actual names that we tend to use. And so when you have a global variable, you can use it locally in any sort of function that you want. When you define a local variable inside of a function, you cannot use it globally. And this entire thing here is not JavaScript specific, although the way JavaScript does it is a little bit quirky. In JavaScript, you can create a variable out here and access it immediately without passing it in through a parameter. In other languages, that's not entirely true. You have to often put course in there, and then let's get rid of this IIFE, just because we want to keep this simple. You would pass in course, and then you would say something like this, do a thing, and then you'd pass in the course variable, and then you'd be able to use it in here. And so when we give this a shot, this is going to work. This is going to say 3 exclamation marks teacher, and then 3 exclamation marks the course, which is outside. And then outside of the scope, it's still not going to give me the teacher. And sure enough, whenever I refresh, 3 exclamation marks, teacher name, 3 exclamation marks, the course name, because we passed it in. So a lot of languages do it this way, but in JavaScript, you don't need to explicitly pass it in because a global variable automatically has jurisdiction into a local ecosystem like a function. And so when I hit refresh, you'll see that absolutely nothing has changed. So let's go ahead and create some code comments, some notes. This is a global variable. Because this function is allowed to be out in the open, this is also called a global function. This is a global function. And then we're just going to execute the function, execute the function. And a simple console.log, no big deal there. And this variable in here, this is the very important one. This is a local variable. And local variables are only accessible within their local ecosystem. So this is only accessible in its local ecosystem. And then 2 console logs. And so now we've properly commented and documented our code. And so the way to think about this is global variables are allowed to be anywhere, assuming that they are defined or they are created outside of a local ecosystem, they're allowed anywhere else. And if they are defined inside of a local ecosystem, like a function, they are not allowed to leave that local ecosystem. They can only live inside of the function. They're local. But again, global variables have jurisdiction to basically be anywhere at any point in time. So what I'd like you to do is give this a shot. Try to break this as best as you can. So create a global variable, create a function, try to access that global variable inside of the function without passing it in. Do not give it a parameter. Just try to access it from within the function. And then create a local variable, access that within the function, but then outside of it, try to access that local variable outside of the function. So create a global variable that works inside of the function, and then create a local variable that does not work outside of a function. Give that a shot, and you should see the same error that I ran into. And that is really all there is to scope. So whenever you're out in the wild and you see an error that says uncaught reference error, a variable is not defined, that's because it is probably out of scope or the variable does not exist yet.